Oh, there we go. I can see myself now. And I can hear myself. And I thought something was missing. The light's missing. There we go. There we go. We're back. What was it? You're muted again. What was it? Turn it off and turn it on again. Okay, I think we're sorted now. Apologies for the break in transmission, but there was a few issues with our browsers. But I think we're okay now. We're back in business. So yeah, the final thing I wanted to mention that we're going to talk about today, which is very important actually, is the United States officially entering World War I on this day. So that's something we're going to do. Stacey, thank you very much for being there. She's like, I can hear you, and thank you. Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate it. Doug, apologies. Blue Rabbit, apologies. You know, sometimes, rarely, admittedly, rarely, but occasionally it doesn't always go to plan, you know, because we are, if you think about the extent of the technology here, I mean, this is kind of amazing that it even works at all. You know, it blows my mind. I joined a Zoom call yesterday and the guy was just sitting there waiting and I was like, this is so weird. It's just so weird that like this even happens, that this is how we work now, you know. Let's look at some of the morning papers. The Anniston Star this morning, officials warn of surge in drug overdoses. This is a dramatic increase in the number of local drug overdoses and associated deaths has prompted Calhoun County officials to issue stronger than usual warnings about the danger of using street drugs. Officials are also trying to track down the source or sources of the bad dope believed to have contributed to at least 5 deaths in the past 7 days. What? I mean, it's like, this is massive. You know, it's massive. 5 deaths in 7 days. From street drugs that are designed to kill people. This is crazy. They said, we're learning among these cases several of the victims believe they were purchasing and planning to use cocaine and were instead given an unknown amount of what is suspected to be fentanyl. The number of drug overdose-related deaths is significantly higher than seen in recent history. So basically, people think they're getting cocaine and they're snorting fentanyl and it's killing them. I mean, just think about that for a moment. Just think about the kind of drug dealers that will be prepared to do that, you know, that obviously need the money so badly that the loss of life. I do feel that in America, like, the value of life is so minimal because of the gun culture and because of, you know, gun deaths and overdose, you know, and addiction. And it's like these problems are so prevalent. And of course, lack of healthcare, you know, lack of healthcare services, that it just seems to me that the value of life seems to be lower in the US than it is in other countries. It's very interesting to me. Talking of which, Zelensky implores UN Council to hold Russia accountable. Yes, it says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in an impassioned address to the United Nations Security Council on Tuesday, likened Russian atrocities in his homeland to Nazi war crimes, calling for Nuremberg-style tribunals to hold Moscow accountable. They shot and killed women outside their houses. They killed entire families, he's saying. It was an emotional visit to a ravaged town of Bucha outside the capital Kiev where he saw all of this. And he had to kind of, you know, communicate what he saw to the United Nations Security Council. It is obvious the key institutions of the world simply cannot work effectively, declared the 44-year-old president, who has won worldwide accolades for presiding over his compatriots' fierce and sustained resistance to the Russian attempt to subjugate Ukraine. Following a Russian pullback from areas around the Ukrainian capital, horrific images and footage has emerged in recent days of the once placid Kiev suburbs and northern areas, bodies lining the streets, corpses with bound hands, the forlorn figure of a man shot dead sprawled beside his bicycle. I mean, he's still on the bicycle. The guy basically got gunned down whilst on the bicycle and he just tipped. And he's still attached to the bicycle and he was lying there dead for 10 days. These satellite images have shown that it was 10 days that these corpses just lay in the streets of Bucha, with their families not knowing where they were. No one picking up the bodies. Nobody, you know, just left there to, you know, and because it's cold there, they're effectively, you know, frozen. I mean, just think about that for a moment. It's completely horrific. It is the stuff of nightmares. At least 410 bodies have been found, including many bearing signs of torture. More such harrowing scenes are likely to emerge, Zelensky said, as Russian forces reassert control in northern areas previously under control. Ukrainian forces reassert control of northern areas previously under control of Russian troops, who are now redeploying and refitting for what Ukrainian and Western officials is believed to be a redoubled offensive in the country's south and east. The world has yet to see what they have done in other occupied cities and regions of our country, Zelensky said. I mean, this is the worry, that, you think it's bad in Bucha. You wait till you go to other towns and other cities and see what's been going on there. Cities and towns you've never heard of that haven't even had any coverage yet because there's no press there. Also, potential for greater weather threats today. It says rain and thunder booms proved to be mostly a bust Tuesday morning, as a weather front which moved through the area created not much more than a messy, rainy commute. There were no reports of any consequential damage or flooding in the local area, although the city of Oxford had received notices of a few flooded roads. I mean, again, more coverage of flooding, no mention of climate change. Every single article in America that I read about the local weather never mentions climate change. They just mention the flooding, they mention the tornadoes, they mention the storms, they mention the unsavory environment, and no mention of climate change. We just need to start connecting these two things, In every conversation, we need to connect them. I was trying to dry my daughter's hair yesterday, which was impossible because she was running around the bedroom. And I basically said to her, I can't keep the hairdryer on because it's killing the planet. You ever made that connection before? The idea that leaving the hairdryer on and not actually using it might be killing the planet? I mean, the hairdryer uses a lot of energy, right? It uses a lot more than just charging your cell phone. It's a high-powered piece of equipment, it can trip the whole house. And as soon as she heard me say it's killing the planet, she came over. That was the leverage that was required. And it made me think, hang on a second, maybe this is the way we go with kids. Get over here, this hairdryer is killing the planet. I mean, I think it's rather brilliant. It's based in truth. Carla, why are you laughing so much at this? This is contemporary parenting. No, I want you to comment. Think about it. The hairdryer is killing the planet. Boom, over she came. The Post-Herald for Alabama this morning leads with outrage over atrocities. Russia faced a fresh wave of condemnation on Monday after evidence emerged of what appeared to be deliberate killings of civilians in Ukraine. Some Western leaders called for further sanctions in response, even as Moscow continued to press its offensive in the country's east. European allies, though, united in outrage, appeared split on how to respond. Poland, which is on Ukraine's border, has taken in large numbers of refugees, angrily singled out France and Germany for not taking more strident action, and urged Europe to quickly wean itself off Russian energy, while Berlin said it would take a longer-term approach. So there we go. States' rate on jobs drops to 3%. This is the Alabama Department of Labor Secretary Fitzgerald Washington announced last week that Alabama's preliminary seasonably adjusted February unemployment rate is 3%, down from January's rate 3.1%. So there we go. That's the Post-Herald this morning. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, the LA Times. Okay. Yes, back into my local hood. Rivalry may have led to Capitol shooting, it says. Sunday's eruption of automatic and semi-automatic gunfire near the state capitol, which left 6 dead and a dozen wounded, appears to be the result of a fight between rivals that caught bystanders in the crossfire. Police initially announced 2 arrests, including one man with long rap sheet who is hospitalized with bullet wounds. What about the gang warfare that takes place in Sacramento and surrounding areas? Yeah, I mean, LA is kind of the home of the gangs, right? I mean, this is like the gangs of New York, the gangs of LA. I mean, it's a thing, and it's been there since the beginning of time. And fundamentally, there's this whole kind of underground existence of this kind of gang life that we don't really know about if we're not in that world, if we're not living in the underworld. And that is how a lot of the people in these gangs, they don't have family. So the gang is the family. The gang is the parent, the gang is the siblings, and the gang is the support network. And so without the gang, there is nothing. And people are vehemently loyal to their gang, and there are all various rituals that take place, the different gangs, tattoos and, branding and various things that kind of cause... I don't know. I mean, I don't know a lot about it, I'll be honest. I've watched a few documentaries about it and read a little bit about it, but I do understand that it's an increasing problem, not just in the US. It's happening all around the world, Well, because I understand the emotional element to it, and I think if you follow the emotions on any subject, you're going to be able to understand what it's all about. I think people fail to do that. They're so desperate for what happened? What happened? It's like, well, you think about what's likely to happen. You think about the emotional impetus behind being in a gang. Why would you want to be in a gang? It's to fit in. It's to be safe. A lot of people, it's a bit like the mafia. People wanted to be part of the mafia so they were safe. They and their families were safe, because if you're on the outside, then you are less safe than being on the inside. It's a little bit like Afghanis joining the Taliban. They're not joining the Taliban because they believe in the Taliban. They're joining them because they want to be safe. And so any of these tribes or clans or gangs, the mentality is similar. Whether it's a gang in Sacramento or a tribe in the Middle East. You've got to think about what humanity needs. Humanity wants to feel loved and supported and connected, and because we are fundamentally tribal, Smiley Martin, who's 27, will be booked at Sacramento County Main Jail on suspicion of possession of a firearm by a prohibitive person and possession of a machine gun as soon as the medical treatment is complete, police said. Martin is the brother of another suspect, Dandre Martin, arrested a day earlier on suspicion of assault with a firearm and being a felon in possession of a gun. Police announced a third arrest on Tuesday, a 31-year-old who was seen carrying a gun in the aftermath of the shooting but did not fire it. I mean, this is the reality, being caught in the crossfire. And then there's a horrific photograph on the front of the LA Times, which I do not recommend you looking at, and I'm struggling to look at myself, revealing a city of the dead. Russian retreat leaves Bucha with bodies and battle Detroiters, and an image of a police officer working at a site where 6 charred bodies were found near Kiev. I mean, it's horrific seeing humans in a pile, just burned to death. It's horrific. These are all people, I think that American press is different to British press. I don't think British press would show these kind of images. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Carla, because I haven't looked at any British newspaper, but I don't think that the rules on showing these images are the same in the US as they are in the UK, from where I'm from. Where I'm from, they would not show dead people on the front of a newspaper. They would crop the image, and they would show Zelensky's face, or they would show the police officer doing his work, or they would blur it out. But it's so explicit, and that's what I was saying earlier about America valuing life in a slightly different way. It's like death is part of life in America because the risk is higher. The risk of dying is higher in terms of, the mortality rate. But I mean, in terms of healthcare and in terms of people die younger in America. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons. It says the corpses, charred and partially dismembered, lay amid a pile of trash in a lot along the edges of a forest. Tattered remnants of clothing clung to shreds of skin. Who was a man? Who was a woman? Who was an adult? Who was a child? This was not possible to determine at a glance. This tableau was about 100 yards from a playground with swings and slides nestled beneath a woodsy shade. A Ukrainian forensic team, each member donning blue plastic gloves, worked with practiced speed. They pushed past a crush of journalists. I mean, I don't know. It's too terrifying to comprehend, really. But I do think it's interesting how the American newspapers seem quite happy to publish dead people. I mean, here's the thing, and this is, I guess, why we don't do it in Europe, or certainly in England, is because until the next of kin have been notified, you can't really publish images of somebody dead, just in case that person is recognizable. That's kind of why we have laws against it. It's like human rights. Well, this is what I'm saying. Maybe the European Court of Human Rights, which has broad jurisdiction over Europe and the UK, has laws on this. Maybe this is European law. It's often the case. Whereas obviously the US does not fall under this. Parking tickets debts eat up refund, it says. An estimated 1 million Californians will not receive their full tax refunds this year because the state will intercept the money to pay off debts such as outstanding parking tickets, tolls, court fees, tuition and child support. California's... what? Oh my God. Endlessly. California's poorest residents who qualify for state tax credit will be hit the hardest as money intended for what Governor Gavin Newsom has heralded as the largest anti-poverty cash assistance program in the country will instead be returned to the government to cover unpaid bills. Nearly 50% of Californians who had at least a portion of their tax refunds taken by the state in 2021 as part of its offset collection program earned less than $30,000 a year and filed for the California Earned Income Tax Credit, or Young Child Tax Credit, according to data compiled by the Franchise Tax Board. That means the state's tax credit programs, which give an extra $3,160 in extra cash to eligible Californians through refunds, often never reach the people they are intended to help, with funds instead going to cities, counties, courts, and other agencies to pay off debts. I mean, that just sounds ridiculous. Why should the people be responsible for other people's debts? It just doesn't make sense to me. Certainly the poorest people. That doesn't sound like the kind of thing that Gavin Newsom would allow. If the poorest people are going to be hit the hardest, it just doesn't make sense. Gas too high at $6. Try $11 is the headline. There's no debate. The $5.83 Californians are paying on average for a gallon of gas stings. But how would you feel if you were charged $10.90? That's what Stimson Hosis is confronted with when he pulls up to his usual Esso station in Hong Kong's Kowloon neighborhood. Filling up his compact SUV will set him back $120. Prices have been so high in the Asian financial center that Ho no longer drives his car to work, opting instead to ride the hard aluminium seats on the city's subway trains. It's so expensive in Hong Kong, said Ho, a 58-year-old government contract worker, but in America the price is so cheap. I mean, that's what I was saying yesterday. The price of gas has been so cheap for so long in the US that people think it's normal and acceptable to pay $2 for gas. And it's like, that is the reason why the US is the second biggest polluter on the planet. Because everyone's just happily driving around, Just get an electric car, I'm telling you. It's like, just lease the cheapest one you can. I guarantee it's going to be cheaper than anything you've ever experienced before, not just in terms of charging it, but mainly in terms of not paying for repairs. And the car will last you longer, The car will last you longer because there's fewer things to go wrong. Well, I just don't understand why you would drive into a forecourt of this kind of fossil fuel company that says in big letters, fossil fuel company. You would take a combustible liquid that is basically a flammable liquid, squirt it into the tank of your car. So you actually want to carry a flammable liquid around in your car, the same car you got your children in. You want to drive around with flammable liquid in that car, do you? So if anything happens to your car, you run the risk of like having your children next to an explosive device. I mean, think about it like that. And then you're basically gonna ignite that combustible liquid in the engine and basically set it on fire, which is what makes the car go. And then out the back of the car is an exhaust, which is putting out black schmutz into the atmosphere, and it's noisy. Right? These noises I haven't heard for years. And then and then that liquid is going to run out, and then you're going to go back and you're going to pay another $100 to put more combustible liquid in, which fundamentally has been mined from oil, which has been drawn out of the ground, out of the Earth's atmosphere. Well, I tell you what's holding people back is, I think things are about to change because the number of new electric cars that are coming out, especially cheaper electric cars, is about to go through the roof. So we have admittedly been in a transitional period where it's been cheaper to get a gas car, and also the dealerships, because, Americans are very good at paying retail. They love to go to a store and pay retail, like full price. Because if you can afford it, it makes you feel good. It's the American dream. I can afford a new car. Whereas in England, everyone's so poor. Nobody buys a new car. You wait for the rich to buy new cars, and then when they've had enough of them after a year, then the rest of us go and buy their cars off of second-hand forecourts. That's basically how it works. I'm telling you, Strong Crab, thank you for joining me on this very subject. But this is my point. So the dealerships are to blame in a way, because and I've experienced this going along with friends to car dealerships here in the US and trying to buy an electric car. They basically talk you out of it and try and make you buy a gas car. That's kind of what happens. Yeah, because they make more commission on a gas car, because there's no profit in electric cars because the platform is too new. So if you go to the Hyundai dealership, Hyundai will have like 7 gas cars and 1 electric car, the Kona, and they'll be like, oh yes, you're going to want to get one of these. And it's like, no, I want the electric car. And they're like, yeah, but they're very expensive. They're just not making any commission on them. And it's all about personal sales. That's how they make their money here, So it's like the dealerships are effectively preventing people from getting access to electric cars because they're getting talked out of it. And then, of course, you've got half the country who are potentially conservatives, and they don't even believe in climate change. So they don't see the benefit because, electric cars are very much a Democrat thing. They see it as a kind of snowflakey, emasculated concept. If you drive an electric car, what are you? You're what are you, a sissy? That they associate a combustion engine with being a man. And a man drives a car, a man drives a truck. Ford have just brought out an electric version of the F-150, which is the most popular selling truck in the US. And you can now get the F-150 Lightning, which is a fully electric version of the most popular truck, right? It's available now. It's expensive, admittedly, but it's fantastic. It's fantastic. I wonder what it'll take for staunch, conservative, white Christian nationals or white nationalist Christians to want to part with their money to get themselves an electric truck. I think they would be like, it's too feminine. It goes against the whole kind of machismo attitude that is the American man, the strong man. That's right, drug dealers love an electric car because you can literally slide in and slide out, nobody hears you coming. But as I've said before on this show, soon it'll come to the point where the only people buying electric cars will be Democrats, and you'll be able to hear conservatives coming over the hill in their combustion engine vehicles. People will be just avoiding each other. I wonder if it really is as binary as that. I'd be interested for your views on this subject. I'm not saying this is the gospel. I'm just saying that this is the anecdotal evidence will suggest this. But I know about people saving money, but I don't think the message about saving money has really kind of cut through with electric cars, because you see, until you get one, you don't realize that you're saving money. People just look at the cost of the car. They don't look at the cost of maintenance. They look at the headline cost of the car. But saying that, there are some companies now that are coming out with very cheap electric cars. And like I said, you can buy second-hand ones. You can buy a Nissan Leaf from 2013 for under $7,000. And that car will do you very well, provided you don't drive more than 50 miles a day. I have my dream electric car. I've been driving the same car for 5 years, and I have no desire to change it. I will literally drive it until I die. I love my car. I love it. And all these new cars that are coming on the market, I don't like them as much as I like my car. And I think that's a great position to be in, I think it's great. And I paid $15,000 for my car second-hand. I think I'm the fourth owner. And it's going to last me forever. And I also don't pay for gas, because I also don't pay for electricity, because it's included in the rent of my property. So my landlord is effectively paying for the electricity to have me drive, so I don't pay to drive in a driving city. Which is amazing, because a lot of people are losing a lot of money paying to drive. Have you adopted the electric vehicle yet? Maybe you can let me know in the chat. Just say, then wake up your device, then say, and then your message. If you've got a Echo Show like Strong Crab has. Otherwise, you can message me at backchannel.tv. So, yes, Singapore, another financial hub in Asia and host of Western European nations such as the Netherlands, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Britain and France, all countries where gas costs more than $8 a gallon. The US, by comparison, is still the most affordable advanced nation to purchase gas in, on par with the likes of developing countries such as Liberia, Rwanda, El Salvador and Zambia, according to research by globalpetrolprices.com. I'm writing that down. globalpetrolprices.com. There it is. I mean, I honestly feel that, we are... It's all cultural, isn't it? Psychological, the way we feel. And the right-wing media has basically been pushing this notion that Joe Biden is responsible for gas being so high. And it's a failure of his leadership. Completely ignoring the fact that gas is in fact it's a commodity, rises and it falls in line with world politics. The cheapest place to get gas, according to globalprices.com, Venezuela. Wow. Libya, Iran, Syria, Algeria, Kuwait, Nigeria, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Malaysia. I mean, it's all under 50 cents a gallon. Iraq, Egypt. The most expensive place, Hong Kong, the Netherlands. I mean, the United States, it's not even close to being the most expensive. People don't realize, they don't realize how lucky they are. Ludicrous jabs within the GOP on the front of the LA Times. It says for the second time in 2 weeks, GOP lawmakers have found themselves the targets of outlandish evidence-free attacks lobbed by fellow Republicans. The first salvo came from freshman Representative Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina, who rebuked last week was rebuked last week by House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy for suggesting on a podcast their colleagues partook in orgies and cocaine. Then freshman Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a perpetual GOP firebrand from Georgia, smeared 3 Republican senators as pro-pedophile in a tweet on Monday evening because they said they intend to support Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation. Jackson's Republican detractors, lobbying charges debunked by judges and commentators across the political spectrum, have accused her of handing down lenient sentences in cases involving images of child sexual abuse. Those accusations, critics and White House have noted, echo an obsession of QAnon conspiracy theorists. Conservatives are increasingly lobbying incendiary and unsubstantiated charges that their political opponents, namely Democrats, are aligned with predators. I mean, none of it is true. I think, you know what happens? Like, here's the thing. This is an analogy. We don't steal from stores, right? We don't, because it's against the law. We just don't. We go and we pick up the item and we pay and we leave. But if you steal something once and you get away with it, you're like, that was interesting. I literally managed to take the same item that I normally pay for and leave the store, and I just didn't pay for it. So maybe I'll do it again. And the next time you go, you take a couple more things, and you sneak out, and you get away with it. And this is what's happening with the conservative leadership now. They've realized that they can make stuff up, and they tried it once, and nobody said anything. And they were like, hang on a second. I can actually say anything. And it kind of goes in the news, and nobody kind of says I can't do this. Nobody fact checks. And so it becomes part of the news cycle because I've said it, because I have the power to say it. And so when you have Marjorie Taylor Greene referring to 3 stalwart people, I think it was Mitt Romney she was talking about, and Susan Collins of Maine, saying these people are aligned with pedophiles is like, she's saying it because she knows she can get away with it. No one's going to reprimand her because there is no accountability and there is no sense of shame and there is nothing that would suggest that these people are anything other than, they have status as lawmakers, so they just get away with stuff. And I think it's like the stealing from shops analogy. You get away with it once and you're like, well, this is now my brand. This is what I do. I don't pay for stuff. And with Marjorie and Madison Cawthorn, they're like, well, the fact that it's not true is irrelevant. It's more about them saying it than the fact that whether it's true or not. They become so obsessed with the sound of their own voice that it's like it's more about them saying it. That's kind of the thing. And I'm very aware of this, and I'm very nervous of this, because it means that we're living in a post-truth world where the truth is just irrelevant. It's just irrelevant. Oklahoma passes abortion ban. The bill would make performing the procedure, except to save the life of the mother, a felony. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So that's the Los Angeles Times this morning. The Napa Valley, not Nappy Valor. Well, that's kind of a funny thing, isn't it? The Nappy Valor. The Nappy Valor Registrar. Should we call it that from now on? The Nappy Valor Registrar. Hey! I haven't slept in a few nights, and I took a couple of melatonin last night, and I was determined to get like a full 10 hours of sleep. And I went into a lovely deep sleep, and after 2 hours, my 3-year-old boy, who has a cold, came in crying, and he was like, and I was like, look, come on, let's have some water, let's blow your nose, I want to sleep with you. And so then I had to sleep next to this 3-year-old boy all night who kicked and punched and thrashed around, sneezed and coughed. And so my sleep was so broken last night, so uninterrupted. And the reason I'm telling you that is that's why I referred to the Napa Valley Register as the Nappy Valor Register, because I slept with my son last night, who did not allow me to sleep. That's why. Vote on mask requirements is on the front of the newspaper. The Napa public school system lifted its mask-wearing requirement on its campus last month, but an attempt to block future mandates will come before its school board on Wednesday evening. Yes, trustees of the Napa Valley Unified School District will hold a special meeting at 5:30 to vote on a resolution that would that would compel the district to honor mask choice for all, ruling out any requirements for students to wear face coverings on campuses. The vote will take place more than 3 weeks after the NVUSD lifted its mask requirement, in line with a California directive that changed the mandate to a strong recommendation effective March 12, following a fall-off in COVID-19 infections since the surge of the Omicron variant late last year. Let me tell you something interesting about school. I, yesterday, went for the first time ever into my daughter's school. They had an open house. First time I've ever been to my daughter's school. She's been going there for a couple of years. And obviously the pandemic meant she had to start there on Zoom. She's 6. And yesterday they had an open house where the parents were taken around the school by the children, like touring the school. And it's amazing because, I've been dropping this child off for months at this school, not knowing what's inside. I've never been. And yesterday she took me in, she showed me around. Yeah, first time. Never seen inside my child's school before. Got a full tour yesterday of what it is that she does in the day. And it was amazing. I had no idea what goes on in that school. Because, they never tell you. You ask them, you say, what did you do at school? And they're like, nah, nothing. They just talk about what they played at school, but they don't really tell you that they're there. I mean, they had an art teacher who was like the coolest man I ever saw. The art room was just like the most beautiful art room I've ever seen. The music room was incredible. Xylophones, African drums, instruments everywhere. They're all playing ukuleles. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It was the most incredible school. And this is a free school. This is the local, free school, public school. And I was like, wow. And I said to the principal, I was like, what you've got here is amazing. I said, I had no idea. I said, when I dropped her off, I always thought that the school was basically that small building at the front. I had no idea there was all these buildings up the back. She's walking me through corridors. It was just like all the corridors in like TV shows, like Glee and stuff, where like American high schools. Walking through the corridors and going into this room and the library. Oh my goodness. Never seen a library like it. It was like a full-size state library with a librarian at a full-time job sitting at a desk and my daughter explaining how they choose books and they take them over and they get scanned and then they can take the books and bring them back. And I was like, this is amazing. The library was huge. It was probably like 1,500 square feet of library. And it was beautiful in there, all mahogany and lovely. Who knew? Who knew that this is what you get in the state of California? But what's interesting is that, I have never really given it that much thought. I just think school is school. It's her whole world. And she's got all these lovely friends and she's hugging them and they're laughing and all her friends are screaming her name and she's like, yeah. And I was like, wow, this is her whole world. No wonder when she comes and hangs out with me, she's a bit like, oh, Dad. Virus spread continues to slow on the front of the Napa Valley Register. Infections and hospitalizations from the coronavirus continued to slow in Napa County last month, but COVID-19 nonetheless claimed 6 more lives locally in March. The deaths of 5 women and 1 man during March were associated with COVID-19, according to Becky Craig, Assistant County Executive Officer. 3 of the 6 patients who lived in the city of Napa, while the others were residents of American Canyon, Yountville, and Angwin, Craig said on an email Friday. The youngest of the patients was in their 30s. The oldest was 100 years old. Napa County recorded 7 virus-related deaths in February and 14 in January, when the spread of COVID-19's Omicron variant drove a sharp spike in infections across the US. Cases in the county peaked at 8,304 that month and hospitalizations at 122, but dropped in March to 481 and 15 respectively, according to county data. As of Tuesday, 137 people in Napa County have died after contracting COVID-19, including 6 non-residents, according to the county's website on the virus. 5 people were hospitalized in county hospitals with the virus on Tuesday, down from 20 or more during past surges. Napa County reported 10 COVID-19 cases on Tuesday, compared to more than 400 a day at the peak of Omicron's spread in early Janvier. Occasionally the words will come out in French, and you'll just have to translate them. County sees slight drop in child abuse cases. This is early indications that Napa County's lower substantiated cases of child abuse and neglect over the past 2 years will rise again as COVID restrictions fade. Napa County Child Welfare Services received 1,330 referrals from its child abuse hotline. It substantiated 84 cases involving 159 children, of whom 49 were removed from their homes. Those numbers were comparable to 2020 and lower for 2019, before the pandemic hit. The county for that year reported 1,689 referrals and 156 substantiated cases involving 242 children. Veronica Piper Jefferson of County Child Welfare Services described the link between falling substantiated cases and pandemic restrictions. Yeah, she says children weren't in school, they were in recreational activities, they weren't seen by those who usually have eyes and ears, who are our main data reporters, she said. In other words, despite the numbers, incidents of child abuse likely didn't plummet over the last 2 years. Oh man, that's terrible, isn't it? And then finally, Zelensky calls for war crimes tribunal. Same story as the president of Ukraine accused Russians of gruesome atrocities in Ukraine and told the UN Secretary Council on Tuesday that those responsible should immediately be brought up on war crimes charges in front of a tribunal like the one established at Nuremberg after World War II. So there we go. That's the Napa Valley Register. Terry has joined us. Hello, Terry. Nice to see you. Waiting Donkey has dropped in. Sticky Lobster. It's disgusting. I mean, these names are disgusting. Sticky Lobster. I mean, when is a lobster sticky? You know, unless it's covered in some kind of garlic aioli. Sam is with us. Zippy Bear, Various Antelope, Kimmy, Strong Crab. Stacey says, Anthony, who's looking after you today? Oh, it's Carla. Yes. Stacey says those names are sticky or disgusting. I agree. I don't even know why we have these names, to be honest. I think it's a very strange decision. You know, was that discussed in your meeting, Carla? Anyway, so there we go. That's the Napa Valley Register. Let's move on a little bit to the Oh no, we've done that one. Hang on. To the New York Times. I haven't done the New York Times for a while, actually. That's interesting. Let's jump on that and see what's happening in New York. Oof. I mean, the imagery is just terrifying. I mean, this is an image of a Ukrainian commuter town. It's called Borodyanka, and it was one of the first places to be hit by Russian airstrikes. Well, the acting mayor estimated the dead at more than 200. This is an image of an apartment block with a hole cut right through the middle of it. Yeah, I mean, there's no dead bodies in these pictures, but the imagery is just horrific. Anyway, the headline is, in a scathing speech, Zelensky chastises UN for inaction. I mean, look, the reason for the inaction is because they don't want to start World War III. You know, that's the reason. It's the only reason, right? No one's taking sides. No one's like, oh, actually, the Russians aren't that bad at all. It's just because they don't want to start World War III. It's very hard to kind of, you know, give ultimatums to a nuclear superpower, such as Russia. Especially with a leader who is mad and who literally could use his nukes at any point. What do we do with that? You know, I really do not want to be obliterated at this stage. We do need to talk about that. Excuse me for yawning, by the way, but, you know, my boy kept me up all night. We should talk about the fact that I don't want it to be too much of a doomsday conversation. But I have been thinking a lot about the fact that we have screwed up this planet so badly, and the world is in such a terrible state, that maybe a worldwide nuclear disaster wouldn't be such a bad thing, you know? Just to get rid of some of the idiots. Unfortunately, it'll get rid of all the idiots and everybody else. Because, we often talk about how these ages, the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and the Ice Age, these ages were all periods in the history of the planet. And these ages did not follow on one from the other. There was periods of nothing in between. Because these ages were like wiped out, And so maybe there's a period of nothing coming for this planet. Maybe this is what it's all about. Maybe the human race was just a period of a few thousand years. Maybe humanity was just one of those ages, and it will go, and then what will follow would be, something else. Not aliens necessarily, but whatever comes after humans. Yeah, I mean, dinosaurs, roamed the planet for billions of years. Dinosaurs were the majority stakeholders in planet Earth. We are just like brief, leaseholders. We're like temporary residents of this planet. My children love dinosaurs. They love dinosaurs. And it's hard to describe to them that dinosaurs really are. They are this planet. This is a dinosaur and water planet. Oh yeah, what happens on that planet? Oh yeah, that's where the dinosaurs lived, and it's like a big water planet. No mention of humans. Humans are like a tiny micro dot in the history of the Earth. And maybe it's time for us to wipe ourselves out. I mean, maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe when we talk about how the human race evolves and, all this excitement about Elon Musk buying a 10% stake in Twitter, who cares? Who cares? It's not real life. The reality is this planet is so screwed, and maybe it's going to be lunatics like Putin or Trump or whoever these, screw loose characters are going to be the ones to be like, well, let's just let it all go, Who cares? Should we do the US news update on this happy note and just see what's going on in the world? Michael's joined us from Florida. Hi, Michael. Nonchalant Crocodile, Kelly, Tough Peacock, Sam. Stacy says danger zone. Yeah, tell me about it. Okay, here's the US News Update. It's a podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. It stars me, and it's just 2 minutes of news. Oh, no, it's not quite ready. It's not quite ready. It's coming, but it's not quite ready. It'll be here momentarily. We'll wait. I'll just wait. Ba-ba-ba. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Just waiting for the podcast. Ba-ba-ba. No pressure. La la la. Yeah, get your popcorn ready. Get your popcorn ready. I don't like salt popcorn. I've never really understood why salt popcorn is even a thing. Who wants to sit in a cinema and eat salt for 2 hours? It's like they only do that so you'll buy drinks. Yeah, the butter one is amazing. The yeah. What? Okay, here we go with the podcast. Here it comes. It's Wednesday, April 6. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. Oklahoma lawmakers on Tuesday passed a bill that would make it illegal to perform an abortion in the state, except in medical emergencies. penalizing those who do with up to $100,000 in fines and 10 years in prison. The Republican-controlled State House of Representatives brought the bill to a vote this week after it was passed last year by the Midwestern State Senate. It now heads to the desk of Republican Governor Kevin Stitt for signing. Stitt has signaled his support for anti-abortion legislation. If he signs the measure, it would take effect this summer unless blocked by courts. An abortion ban in Oklahoma would widen a swathe of the country where there is little to no legal abortion access. The state has become a destination for Texas women seeking abortion since Texas in September banned abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. The measure passed by the Oklahoma House on Tuesday is one of several anti-abortion bills making its way through the state's legislature as white Christian nationalism grows stronger throughout conservative politics. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden on Tuesday tasked the U.S. Health Department with developing a national action plan to tackle the looming health crisis of long COVID, a complex multi-symptom condition that leaves many of its sufferers unable to work. Long COVID, which arises months after a COVID-19 infection, affects nearly 7% of all U.S. adults and 2.3% of the overall population. The plan will expand research, care and disability services for people suffering from the condition, the White House said. Your daily news update is part of the volume. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device. There it is, the US News Update. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Anthony Davis. This is Backchannel, 7 minutes after 10 here on the West Coast, 7 minutes after 1 Eastern. Oh, it's 8 minutes past now. Sorry, it seems to change. Don't know why that whole time thing just kind of ticks up all the time. We've been looking at the morning papers. The New York Times also leads with Germany strains to wean itself off gas imports, subsidizing war. Hundreds missing and tons of rubble to clear. This is the story out of Borodyanka in Ukraine. This is the apartment complex flattened there that was once his home. His belongings in plastic bags on the sidewalk, besides a few blackened cooking pots. Oh man, I mean that's the reality for people living in Borodyanka. What does Putin actually own is the question. It's an interesting story here by Mike McIntyre. It says, obscured in a 421-page legal filing in an obscure court case in a single sentence, offered almost as an afterthought about a meeting at a Geneva restaurant where two businessmen chatted about a yacht which had been presented to Mr. Putin. The passing reference, cited in a 2010 judge's decision in London on a financial dispute involving a shipping company, is the rare bit of public evidence directly linking President Vladimir Putin of Russia to any of the luxury boats, planes or villas associated with him over the years. It's taken on new significance as US and European authorities pursue the hidden wealth of Mr. Putin and people close to him in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But the British court document also holds a clue to why it's been so hard to clearly connect the Russian president to his rumored riches. The yacht, called the Olympia, was managed by a company in Cyprus, where corporation filings show it was true the true owner was not Mr. Putin, it was really the Russian government. Indeed, it's one of many extravagant assets long speculated to be Mr. Putin's that actually are owned by or controlled by the state, showing how much the private interests of the president and his inner circle have merged with those of the government that he's dominated for 2 decades. Others include a sprawling resort, a fleet of expensive cars, fancy planes, and still more yachts. So I was trying to get my head around this. I'm doing a little bit of research, and basically, Putin deposits funds in the bank accounts of oligarchs. That's what an oligarch is. They're basically a custodian of Putin's money, or of Russian government money, and they're allowed to go and spend it as long as they invest in other nations and other countries. And London, of course, was home of many oligarchs, including Roman Abramovich, who is now on the run. I'll tell you where he is now. The last check, Abramovich was in Dubai. You know? He actually got... they reckon he got poisoned by the Russian government. Do you hear about this? They reckon he got poisoned, yeah. He recovered. I think he went to Turkey to recover or somewhere, and then he ended up he's now in Dubai. He did briefly go to Russia. But, you know, in England, Abramovich was considered to be just like a member of the society, you know, just part of rich, you know. England very much welcomed rich people. It didn't really matter where they were from China or from Saudi Arabia or from, you know, Dubai or anywhere in the Middle East, you know, UAE or Russia. It was irrelevant. Anybody that was wealthy was always welcome in England because England didn't have any money of its own. You know, all of the British money got eaten up, swallowed. That's why, you know, like fixing the roofs of the houses that you see in Downton Abbey. That's where all the English money went. There is literally no English money left. And so they started selling off assets. You know, things in England like castles and I mean, even like archways, famously. Admiralty Arch. You know about the sale of Admiralty Arch, Carla? That was sold to the Saudis years ago. It's the home where the Deputy Prime Minister lives, normally. It's at the end of the Mall. That was sold to the Saudis about 10 years ago. Admiralty Arch, it's like this is part of the fabric of England. You know, it should belong to the Queen or something. Selling these bits off. And then all the hotels that used to be part of the British establishment, the Savoy is owned by who's the Savoy owner? He's, is he Bahrain or he's somewhere? All these great establishments, you know, the places like the Grosvenor House, a very famous hotel, now has a kind of Middle Eastern lettering on it. All of these great establishments that had history in England, Claridge's, they all now belong mainly to Middle Eastern companies. The Shard, which is a very famous building in England that houses hotels and Shangri-La and various amazing things. It's the tallest building in Europe. It's about 1,200 feet tall, made of glass. That's owned by the Saudis. Battersea Power Station, owned by the Malaysian Pension Fund. All of these great kind of... And when you come to England, you're like, wow, look at all this architecture. It's not even English anymore. And this was out of necessity because there's just not enough money in the British economy. So they have to welcome outside investors. And I don't care. I mean, I'm not prejudiced. I don't care who owns these things as long as they stay open. I mean, it all started years ago with Harrods. You know, Harrods was like the famous department store. I mean, Selfridges was owned by the Americans. Mr. Selfridge was an American, I seem to remember. But Harrods was owned by Mohammed Al Fayed, who was famously the father of Dodi Fayed, who was the boyfriend of Princess Diana. And Mohammed Al Fayed sold... He was Egyptian, Mohammed Al Fayed. And he sold Harrods about 10 years ago to the Saudis, the Saudi royal family. I mean, this is what happens. So you now have like second generation sales of British institutions going on. I don't even know who owns Selfridges anymore. I worked in Harrods. It was one of my first jobs when I was 17. Harrods, and I worked in Selfridges when I was 16. One of my first jobs out of school was working in Selfridges. The most beautiful department store, still is. For me, Selfridges is still the best department store in England. It's beautiful. You know, it has amazing heritage. Did you ever see the TV series Mr. Selfridge, starring Jeremy Piven? Do you remember that? I love that show. Loved it. It's like a period drama set in Selfridges, about the early days of Selfridges. It was wonderful. And it was all done on a set. It didn't look anything like Selfridges. But I mean, they did their best, you know. And I loved that show. Jeremy Piven and his beautiful hair system. What else do we have? Pills are new target in 50-year abortion battle. It says last year, after Texas passed its strict abortion ban, surgical abortions in the state dropped by half. Many women found a workaround: pills. The week the law took effect, requests for medication abortion shot up 138 a day, from 11 a day, at just one service that delivers the pills by mail. Anti-abortion lawmakers in the state were already on it. That same week, they'd pass another law making it a felony to provide abortion pills through the mail and requiring doctors to comply with new testing and reporting procedures to describe them. A medical abortion is the new front in the nation's 5-decade-long fight. Both sides anticipate that by summer, the Supreme Court could overturn or pare back the constitutional right to abortion. Yeah, it's going to happen because of white Christian nationalism. That is now the fundamental movement in America, and it will pare back all of your rights. It will advocate for freedom, and yet it will pare back your rights. Aiming to change Twitter, Musk joins its board. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, reached out to Twitter's chief executive a few weeks ago with a friendly heads up. He was buying shares of the social media company. Mr. Musk confided and wanted to discuss how to make Twitter better. He has ideas for reshaping social networks that dovetailed with those of Twitter's founder, according to the public exchanges. All three have floated the notion of radically shifting the power in social networking to users and away from behemoth companies, by using an approach to technology that would give people control over what they see in their social media feeds. In the ensuing weeks, the owner, Mr. Ograwal, discussed having Mr. Musk become more active participant in Twitter's future, according to two people with knowledge of the conversation. Well, look, the right-wing media is saying that Musk, because Musk is a bit of a conservative in many ways, a bit of a Trump fan, that he is going to, allow Trump back on the platform. This is after Truth Social, Trump's platform, has failed to kind of gain any traction and technically is a bit of a disaster. So there we go. That's the how the the New York Times looks. The Wall Street Journal: Zelensky asks UN to punish Russia. Ukraine leader calls for country to be ousted from Security Council over war crimes charges. Mayor helped resist, then was slain, it says. The mayor, his name is Olha Sukenko. He took care of her village. It's a she. She took care of the village like a family for more than a decade, locals said, sprucing up public buildings, organizing concerts, and settling disputes. When the Russian army withdrew last week after a month-long operation, her neighbors found her lifeless body in a shallow grave, her hands bound. Her husband and son lay next to her dead. They are but three of the faces of the brutal aftermath of Russia's occupation that Ukrainian officials and villagers said left civilians dead. This is the tragedy, isn't it, of this? The mayor helped with this resistance and yet ultimately was slain. These are humans with lives and a history, and they had a future too. And now they don't exist anymore. These people have effectively been eradicated from humanity. And this is normal. The character of the individuals that can murder others in this way means that the training of the Russian military must be to kind of Nazi standards. How is it that the Russian military are capable of such atrocities? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Do you understand it? I don't understand it. Decisive Seal says hi. Hello, Decisive Seal. Paul has joined us. Vincent Daniels is here. Lovely Cuckoo. Decisive Seal, as I mentioned. Rebecca and Ryan and Bill. And Ernest and Peppy and Michael and Kelly. Sam and Tamir. Welcome to Backchannel today. Vincent, it's first time on the show. Nice to see you from America. It's 20 past 10 here on the West Coast, 20 past 1 Eastern. JetBlue is vying to acquire Spirit Airlines for roughly $3.6 billion, challenging Frontier in its efforts to buy the ultra-low-cost carrier. That would be good because JetBlue is probably the best of these smaller carriers in America, and Spirit is the worst. And so JetBlue could easily JetBlueify all of the Spirit service, couldn't they? That would be great. Boeing disrupted production of one of its new Air Force One planes earlier this year. They've got problems in the factory. Yes, I do love the whole Air Force One story. Have we talked about it here on the show, the Air Force One story? Well, originally, the Air Force One is the plane that the president flies in, and it's been the same plane since 1994. It was George Bush Sr., I think, that commissioned the current planes. They had to have two of them, And Donald Trump, it fell on Donald Trump to commission the next planes. Actually, that's not true. It actually fell on... hang on, I'm just replying to somebody about what I'm doing afterwards. There we go, it's done. It actually fell on Barack Obama to decide who... I'm going for a hike. I just want you to know I'm just going for a hike. It fell on Barack Obama to choose the planes, for the new planes. And then when Trump comes along, he's like, well, I don't want Barack Obama's planes. I'm going to choose my own planes because Barack Obama's overpaid for planes. And these are two Boeing 747s, that Boeing are going to make for the Air Force One. So do you know what Trump does? He finds two Russian planes that are decommissioned. Second-hand planes. They're the same type of plane, but they were designed for a Russian airline. They were built for a Russian airline, but the Russian airline went bust. And so these two planes have been lying there in the desert, just waiting for ownership. And so he cancelled the order with Boeing. I don't know how much the cancellation cost. And then he's bought these two planes for basically the price of one. He's bought two planes for the price of one. The problem is that these two planes are commercial airliners. They're not, military airliners, as Air Force One needs to be. And so they've had to now go into a hangar to be converted into military airlines. And this is coming at a huge cost. So, of course, Trump tries to take credit for cancelling the expensive order and then buying the planes cheaper without realising that the cost of converting them is going to be way more than what it would have cost to build two military planes in the first place. Because he's an idiot, He just wanted to take the credit for reducing the price, I don't know. So that's interesting now that the Boeing has got factory problems after disruption of one of its new Air Force One planes. I got very close to going on Concorde. I never flew on it. I mean, I've been on it when it's been dormant. I've been on it I've seen two Concordes, one in Scotland and one in Brooklands in Surrey. There's two Concordes there. So there's one in Edinburgh and there's one in Brooklands. And so I've been on both of those, but they're both in museums. And I once hosted, when I was about 18, I hosted a tug of war at Heathrow Airport for charity, where people were having to tug two Concordes. They had two Concordes side by side, and they had a rope tied to the nose wheel, and two teams were having to pull the Concorde along the tarmac, and I had to commentate on this. So that's the closest I've got to going on Concorde, is commentating on a tug of Concorde race. I mean, it's not bad. I would love to have gone on that plane. I watched another documentary. I must have seen 100 documentaries on Concorde. I do think it's the most incredible thing. And I've watched 100 documentaries on it. It was a very uncomfortable plane. It was very small inside. It only had 100 seats. And the ceiling was very low and the windows were very small. Do you know how small the windows were? This is how big the windows were on Concorde. Yeah. They were that big. Tiny, tiny little windows. You couldn't get your head out of a Concorde window. The Concorde windows were way too small for a head. If you're lucky, you would be able to get maybe your arm through a Concorde window. But it had 100 seats, and the thing that's most interesting about Concorde is when you got up there into the cruising altitude, it was 59,000 feet. Well, you can see the curvature of the Earth. You can almost see where the sky goes black at that altitude. You're almost in like inner space. And it was so silent up there because there's no weather. There's no turbulence. You would never have turbulence on Concorde. You ever thought about that? Like, zero turbulence. You could literally balance a coin on its edge on your tray table and it wouldn't move. Even though you were going at twice the speed of sound. There's zero turbulence. And the plane is shaped like a dart, so it just cuts through the sky. Well, the people that used it the most, turned out to be kind of, business people who needed to be in New York, like Wall Street people. Famously, there were people like Sir David Frost who would go on it 3 times a week because he would host a show in America and then host a show in England. And so he would commute on Concorde. And it was only 3.5 hours to get between London and New York. 3.5 hours. So, it was a very doable commute. And you didn't get jet lag because, of course, you were just, you would beat the time zone. Joan Collins, people like that would use it regularly. But then you also had like people that just loved going on it and would go on it all the time and just save up to go on it, It's great. What else do we have here? Chinese firms attempt to avoid US delisting. Several Chinese companies that face the prospect of being booted off US stock exchanges have come up with a way to keep their listings as Beijing seeks to resolve a long-running audit standoff with Washington. The China franchise of Canadian coffee chain Tim Hortons, which is preparing to go public via a merger with a US-listed blank check firm and biotechnology company, are among those preparing to comply with a new law and give US regulators access to their audit records. This is interesting. So they're basically it's basically Chinese companies that would have been delisted because of, these rules about trade with China, are working or have a workaround now, Less immigration, more labor shortage. This story that says in an economy where nearly every industry is short of labor, nursing homes represent an extreme. Their employment has fallen 16%, and 99% of homes said last fall that they didn't have enough staff. Burnout and stress are leading causes, but so is a less-known contributor: fewer immigrants. Yeah. Over the years, there's been a whole range of people, coming in from Nigeria, for example. And it says it's become much tougher for Nigerians to emigrate to the US because of more stringent visa screening at Americans' consulates abroad. The situation has worsened with pandemic-related backups and immigration processing. For several years after the recession, roughly 1 million people moved to the US annually. That pace started to slow during the Trump administration and fell to a trickle. Well, that's because Trump basically banned anybody who was from a country that had predominantly brown people, All Muslim-majority countries, anywhere where it was like brown skin, nope, you're not coming in. I told you I had a friend who's in England, who's in London, who was born in England, but who is Eritrean, of African descent, who couldn't get into America because she had an African name and brown skin. They basically barred her from coming in, even as a tourist. Lovely. All under Trump. So this is the Wall Street Journal that we're looking at here, just finally. Anthony, I can't fly in an aeroplane because it causes seizures, says Stacey. Oh, that's interesting. Excellent Wolf has joined us. Vincent Daniels is back again. Nice. Lovely. Welcome. Willkommen. Let's jump back to some of our stories this morning. The Akron Beacon Journal is next. They lead with man gets life in bank VP's death. This is a South African man serving a prison sentence for 2 murders in New Mexico will likely never be free again after he was sentenced to life in prison on Monday for the killing of a bank executive in Akron. Conservatives win big in Ohio State House on guns, abortion and more. Yes, the fight to allow adults to carry concealed weapons without training or permits played out in the Ohio State House for more than 2 decades. Well, in March, gun rights advocates finally won when the governor, Mike DeWine, signed a constitutional carry law. Lovely. What a beautiful thing. I just don't get it. But, I don't think I'm supposed to get it. Just don't get it. I don't think I'm supposed to get it. Staying in Ohio, Columbus Dispatch, they lead with GOP bill would create Ohio's Don't Say Gay. It's a version of the Florida law restricting how teachers talk about sexual orientation and gender identity has been introduced in Ohio. I love that story that was out yesterday about the mayor of New York who was basically paying to put billboards up in Florida to encourage people to say gay and also encourage people to move to New York where they welcome gay people. That was very cute. Columbus leaders condemn gay bill. They say it's vague and it undermines the ability to teach. Whitehall touts new safety plan. The city hopes voters approve police levy as community leaders say crime is declining. So there we go. That's the Columbus Dispatch today. Let's go to Cincinnati next for the Inquirer, because I want to get onto these other subjects as well. Fight for American values plays out. Speakers denounce evil at men's conference. And you can't argue with cash. More Greater Cincinnati homes being sold without lenders. That's interesting. People must have a whole lot of money in Cincinnati. Either that or the houses are very cheap. Yes, I wanted to talk about the Oklahoma ban. This is the law that has been passed that would impose a near-total ban on abortions in the state. It would criminalize performing an abortion in almost all cases, except where it could save the life of a pregnant woman in a medical emergency. Medical professionals convicted under the laws face fines of up to $100,000 and 10 years in prison. It comes as the U.S. Supreme Court weighs a case that could overturn abortion rights across the U.S. later this year. So there we go. That's kind of, the reality. And this is not just Oklahoma, obviously. This started in Texas, then it went to Florida, then Arizona, and now Ohio, and now Oklahoma, and all of the Republican states that are, steeped in this white Christian nationalism are basically going to criminalize abortion. They're just going to. This is just going to be the new reality for America. You just have to accept it. And then, of course, the Supreme Court will rule on it, and they will overturn the Roe versus Wade law that all women have a right to an abortion. And then abortion will be one of those things that is effectively outlawed anywhere in the United States. Although there'll be some kind of state law, and it'll all go to court, and it'll all be a whole mess. But nearly 5 decades after the U.S. Supreme Court's Roe versus Wade decision, opponents and supporters of abortion rights are still battling over the issue in court, at the ballot box, and in state legislatures. Several states have introduced or passed new restrictions with an eye toward giving the Supreme Court a chance to overturn its decision. And the High Court agreed in May to review a Mississippi law that aims to make most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy illegal. The case will be the court's first abortion law since Justice Amy Coney Barrett took the bench in October. 6 in 10 adults say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. 39% say it should be illegal in most cases, according to a survey conducted in the spring. Although abortion is a divisive issue, about 6 in 10 US adults do not take an absolutionist position on abortion. 34% say it should be legal in most but not all cases, while 26% say it should be illegal in most but not all cases. I wonder what the split is like male and female, I'd love to know how many women would be voting for abortion. It just begs the question to me that we are now living in a time where madness is set in. It's just madness, because there's no justification for banning abortion. There's no justification. They found this piece of equipment that can detect heart activity in a baby from 6 weeks. And they're like, oh, well, that's why the baby has to live, because it's got heart activity. And it's like, it's not a heartbeat. The child is not viable. And anybody that works in this sector understands this. Any clinician or medical person or radiologist or, they all understand this. Not radiologist. Who does maybe it is a radiologist. Yeah, maybe it is a radiologist. Somebody that does scans. I think it's a radiologist. They spend their whole day scanning babies, unborn babies. And all the radiologists say that is not a viable child, not a viable baby. Well, while abortion has long divided political partisans, the partisan gap is now considerably wider than it was in the past. Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents are much more likely than Republicans and Republican-leaners to say abortion should be legal in all or most cases, 80% versus 35%. The 45 percentage point gap is up from the 33-point gap in 2016, when 72% of Democrats and 39% of Republicans supported legal abortion in almost all cases. Stenographer. Oh, a sonographer, that's right. I think a radiologist does x-rays. Yeah? X-rays. There we are. Thank you, Carla. Attitudes about whether abortion should be legal vary widely by religious affiliation. Around 3/4 of white evangelical Protestants say it should be illegal in all or most cases. 21% say it should be legal in at least most instances. But by comparison, a 63% majority of white Protestants who are not evangelical say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Sizable minorities of Republicans and Democrats said in a 2019 survey they did not agree with the dominant position on abortion policy of the party they identify with or lean toward. About a third of Republicans or GOP leaners say they did not agree with their party on abortion. This includes about 1 in 10 who said they agreed with the Democratic Party on abortion, and 23% who said they did not agree with either party. The thing is, if you have a conversation with somebody who's anti-abortion, their argument is so steeped in like religious rhetoric that it's very difficult to kind of have a conversation that is legitimate. Because when people refer to God, that's like as high as it goes. And they're like, well, I refer you to my God. And it's like, well, okay, then. Fine. You know, if that's where this is coming from, then fine. Who am I to criticize your God? But trust me, God wants people to have an abortion. You know? Especially if they've been raped or the victim of sexual assault or they're, you know. Yeah, I mean, this has been the debate since time began. But the point is that and it's basically been the hot button issue for in America for decades. And devout Christians are, as Stacey says, thank you, Stacey, for your message. This is their view. But it's like, at what point does common sense override a belief system? At what point do you realize that not everybody is in a loving relationship? And that a lot of abortions are born because people have a romance with somebody that they thought they were going to have a romance with, and it was all going to turn out very nicely, and it turns out they're a really bad person. And before you know it, they're pregnant. What do you want to do? Like be a single parent with a child and no two parents? It's a very nuanced conversation. There's so many different versions of this debate to be had. But my biggest issue is the fact that invariably the white Christian nationalists who are encouraging this debate are old white men. And that's the bit I have the biggest problem with. Old white men telling young black women invariably what to do with their bodies. And so to me, this is all part of racism, and this is all part of control, and this is nothing to do with freedom. It couldn't be further from freedom if it tried. I also want to talk about the Oath Keepers. This is kind of an interesting story. I don't know if you've heard about this one. This is following a 2-day hearing. Jonathan Mosley had his law license revoked on Friday. The outlet reported saying it found that he'd violated professional rules that govern safekeeping property. candor towards the tribunal, fairness to opposing party and counsel, unauthorized practice of law, multi-jurisdictional practice of law, bar admission and disciplinary matters. Oh, and misconduct. This is the Oath Keeper's lawyer that's been disbarred over an avalanche of professional violations. And he's an attorney known for representing a number of infamous defendants facing charges of the January 6th insurrection, including leaders of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. The Virginia State Court has disbarred him. Among his most notorious clients are Kelly Meggs and Stuart Rhodes, two Oath Keeper ringleaders charged with seditious conspiracy. Aaron Wallen Woolkind and Enrique Tarrio, both Proud Boys bosses, and Ali Alexander, the Stop the Steal rally founder. It was not immediately clear how the bar action would affect their cases. But the lawyer is planning to fight the decision. And immediately filed an appeal. He said, since it's on appeal, otherwise confidential, I'll have to wait to give a response. His troubles with the Virginia State Bar could imperil his ability to continue as an attorney for Meggs in an array of other January 6 litigation. He's not a member of the District of Columbia Bar, but he does belong to the bar of the federal court in D.C. I mean, look, there just seems to be, like, if bad people try and find a lawyer, they'll probably just find a bad lawyer. It's like, it's all connected, isn't it? It's like, oh, who in the underworld is going to recommend me a lawyer? And also, which lawyer is going to take on a case by somebody like this? Who's going to try and get somebody off for trying to break into the Capitol building and cause be part of an effort to overthrow the government? I mean, which decent lawyer is going to want to defend that person? It would take an idiot. Oh, well, that's a coincidence. Wayne's in California has just dropped in. Hello, Wayne. Welcome. Nice to see you. What was that story about looking for a house to buying an old van? This is kind of interesting. It's a story in the Daily Beast. It says, we drove north on the freeway toward the parking lot. The man from the ad told us to meet him in. Neil lectured me on the fact that it was an old van. It probably had rust. It probably had all kinds of mechanical problems. But I was busy staring out of the window at the cookie-cutter houses carved into the foothills. Brown stucco with brown roofs and brown shutters, smashed up against one another row after row. We turned slowly down side streets where empty warehouses loomed in weekend silence. In the corner spot of the last one on the left, a colossal orange rectangle. The van was so huge in person it was practically cartoonish. Neil's pickup trunk was dwarfed in its shadow. We walked circles around it as we waited for the seller to appear. The front end was sub-nosed and square, retro-looking in a way. The tyres were about as high as my waist, and the orange paint job had nearly been a DIY project. As glossy drip marks dotted the exterior, Neil had climbed underneath to check for rust when a door to the warehouse swung open. A bearded guy walked out and introduced himself as Joe. He and Neil began taking details about mileage and repair and owner history. I opened the driver's side door to the faded blue interior, peeling at the bottom corners of the door panel. It reminded me of my grandmother's old station wagon. The steering wheel and its entire steering column sagged downwards towards me as I stood in the doorway. Joe explained that years of previous owners reaching up and using the wheel to hoist themselves into the driver's seat were the culprit of the signature sag. She was that big. He tossed us the keys. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are kind of selling their homes, deciding to live mobile instead, I mean, partly because they've got no money and they need to reduce the cost of living, but secondly because, you don't need to be anywhere now. If you have a 5G connection, you can go anywhere. He tossed us the keys and told us to take her around the block. Neil fired it up and I pulled myself into the passenger seat. Felt like being at the helm of a school bus. We drove slowly down the street, hardly able to hear each other over the 7.5-litre engine, though I can't remember exactly what we were saying anyway. Somewhere beneath the deafening hum of tyres and the smell of dusty brakes, we'd made up our minds. The idea of the two of us rolling around in this outlandish orange van made more sense than anything we'd considered prior. This was our gateway car from a life of supposed twos and should-haves. But if the potential of a mortgage had felt like dipping our toe into the big, daunting pool of life, then buying this van would be like careening off the high dive, and yet bizarrely it felt safer. When we arrived back in the parking lot where Joe stood, Neil pulled his wallet from the back pocket of his jeans. Sheepishly, he explained that we would need to wait until the following week for another paycheck to come through so we could take the full asking price of $7,800 in cash. At that moment, we only had around $7,000 in savings. We offered up the 100 or so we had on us if he would just hold the van until then. Joe leaned forward and plucked one single $20 bill from the crinkled fan of money in Neil's hand. "Don't worry, I won't sell it on you," he smiled. The following Friday, after Neil's paycheck had cleared, I left my office to dive back to the bank. I strode in more assuredly this time, past the ATMs, past the office of the man in the red tie, and up to the counter where the clerk asked from behind the glass what she could do for me that morning. "I need all my money," I answered, before realizing that sounded like the opening to a bank robbery. "I needed to withdraw everything I had in both checking and savings," I said slower this time. I was expecting some sort of grandiose reaction from the handful of tellers behind the long glass window. I wanted everyone in the bank to understand I was standing there doing the most insane thing I'd ever done, but in reality I was just another person withdrawing a totally unimpressive amount of cash. And for what? They really didn't care. Well, that's interesting because, normally if you go in and, take out a large sum of money, they ask you what it's for, to prevent money laundering. Despite the change in tone I made inside the bank, I still felt like I still left feeling like I'd robbed the place. I sat in the driver's seat of my Jeep and opened the white envelope full of cash. More cash than I'd ever seen. All the cash we had to our names. In fact, the balance in our checking account was $0, and the balance in our savings was about $17. I was 26 years old, and I had $17. We drove up that evening to make the exchange. I had no interest in carrying that amount of money on me any longer than I needed to. Once back in the warehouse lot, we handed over the cash, and Joe handed over a 2-inch thick file. Meticulous records of every repair, every modification, every maintenance item that had been done to the van. So meticulous, in fact, that the very last piece of paper in the folder was the decal sticker that had been on the van's windshield on the lot in 1990, the same year that I was born. Joe shook our hands and gave us the keys. It was the most official-seeming gesture throughout the entire process, and I was caught up in the excitement of it when I realized suddenly that Neil and Joe were both staring at me expectantly. It hadn't quite occurred to me that I would be the one to drive the van back to our apartment 45 minutes south. We'd come up in Neil's pickup truck, a stick-shift Toyota that I'd never properly learned to drive. I feigned confidence, something I would become an expert in the coming months, and climbed into the driver's seat alone. I merged slowly onto the freeway and into the evening traffic, inching forward through tightly packed lanes. I realized I couldn't see the faces of the drivers in the passing sedans. I was up so high. I could only look down at their legs. I was now making eye contact with the drivers of passing tractor trailers instead. In a sudden and sobering moment of clarity, it occurred to me what I had done. Like waking up from sleepwalking to find yourself standing in the kitchen. I came to and realized I was holding the steering wheel of a van I'd bought on a whim. What was the plan? Where was I? Better yet, who was I? In a matter of 1 week, I'd gone from looking at floor plans and mortgages to riding eye level with truckers and $17 left to my name, and yet part of me was thrilled at the absurdity of it all. Somewhere in my gut, I'd known that my quest to settle down was a sham. I was just playing a role I'd seen, doing things because it seemed like I was supposed to, not because I actually wanted to. I'd toddled into that mortgage loan meeting like a child in her mother's high heels, clumsy and clueless. Behind the wheel of the van felt honest, perhaps because uncertainty felt more like home than anything else. It's very romantic. Yeah, I like the idea that older people are doing this. I have a friend who sadly is now dead, but his name's Peter, and we were very close for many, many years, and he basically bought himself a static caravan. He got divorced and he didn't have any money, and he was like, I'm buying a static caravan. And his whole house cost him £30,000. And it was a lovely big static caravan. It was like a house on little stilts. It didn't go anywhere, but it basically worked for him, and he was very happy there. You don't have to spend crazy money to live. You can totally do it. Totally do it. One final thing in the last 5 minutes of the show, because it's the 6th of April today, and that means that in 1917, on this day in 1917, 2 days after the US Senate voted 82-6 to declare war against Germany, the US House of Representatives endorsed the declaration by a vote of 373-50, and America formally entered World War I. On this day in 1917. When the war erupted in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson pledged neutrality for the United States, a position the vast majority of Americans favored. Britain, however, was one of America's closest trading partners, and tensions soon arose between the United States and Germany over the latter's attempted quarantine of the British Isles. Several US ships traveling to Britain were damaged or sunk by German mines, and in February 1915, Germany announced unrestricted warfare against all ships, neutral or otherwise, that entered the war zone around Britain. 1 month later, Germany announced that a German cruiser had sunk the William P. Fry, a private American vessel. Well, President Wilson was so outraged, but the German government apologized and called the attack an unfortunate mistake. Those were the days when war was a little bit more gentlemanly, wasn't it, Well, on the 7th of May, the British-owned Lusitania ocean liner was torpedoed without warning just off the coast of Ireland. Of the 1,959 passengers, 1,198 were killed, including 128 Americans. The German government maintained the Lusitania was carrying munitions, but the US demanded reparations and an end to German attacks on unarmed passenger and merchant ships. In August, Germany pledged to see the safety of passengers before sinking unarmed vessels, but in November sunk an Italian liner without warning, killing 272 people, including 27 Americans. With these attacks, public opinion in the United States began to turn irrevocably against Germany. And so, in 1917, Germany, determined to win its war of attrition against the Allies, announced the resumption of unrestricted warfare in war zone waters. And 3 days later, the United States broke diplomatic relations with Germany, and just hours after that, the American liner Housatonic was sunk by a German U-boat. On February 22nd, Congress passed a $250 million arms appropriations bill intended to make the United States ready for war. In late March, Germany sunk 4 more U.S. merchant ships, and on the 2nd of April, President Wilson appeared before Congress and called for a declaration of war against Germany. 4 days later, his request was granted. So on the 26th of June, the first 14,000 U.S. infantry troops landed in France to begin training for combat. After 4 years of bloody stalemate along the Western Front, the entrance of America's well-supplied forces into the conflict marked a major turning point for the war and helped the Allies to victory. When the war finally ended on November 11, 1918, more than 2 million American soldiers had served on the battlefields of Western Europe, and some 50,000 of them had lost their lives. So there we go. That's in commemoration of the First World War that started on this day, 1917. Shrek has joined us. Hello, Shrek. Welcome. First time on the show. Wayne and Vincent and Andrea. And Chivalrous Skunk is here for the first time as well from Oregon. Welcome to you. Thank you to everybody who's been part of the show today. Appreciate you and for spending your time. And thank you to Carla for producing the program. Thank you to Backchannel for making the program happen. And I'll come back tomorrow and we'll do the same thing again from 9 a.m. Pacific. That's 12 o'clock Eastern. Have yourself a very good day. Your pal, Hal, is next. Bye for now.